Hello everyone, my name is Sandra Esinamapen and welcome to Business Live. Coming up this evening is government 10 billion cedi request from central bank in line with BOG's financing laws. We will hear from an economist. Toyota Ghana postponed plans to assemble cars in Ghana due to COVID-19 pandemic. Also coming up tonight, scientists discover high concentration of mercury in soil and water in mining communities following illegal mining activities. Details coming up after this break.
The government is developing a 3-year COVID-19 alleviation program to be known as the Ghana Cares Program to help rescue the economy from the clutches of the coronavirus pandemic. The impact of the coronavirus disease on the Ghanaian economy could last for 3 years, the government has predicted. To address this, the President has directed the Ministry of Finance to come up with a stabilization and a revitalization plan for the country. President of the Ghana Union of Traders Association, GUTA, Dr. Joseph Obeng, has described government's 3% interest on the 600 million Ghana cedi stimulus package to support micro, small and medium enterprises as a free gift. The interest rate on the package, he said, is feasible due to the 1-year moratorium and a 2-year repayment period for MSMEs. Dr. Obeng noted that this giveaway from government was far better than that of some banks who have pegged their interest rate between 22 to 25%. Petroleum products are likely to pay more for the fuel they purchase at the various pumps in the first pricing window in June. That's according to energy think tank, the Institute of Energy Security, IES. The Institute of Energy Security explained that per its analysis, it expects the prices of fuel on the domestic market to go up and above April 2020 levels. IES attributes this to the 23.25% surge in price of Brent crude oil, in addition to the 41.80% and 22.68% significant rise in the price of gasoline and gas oil, respectively, on the international market.
So those were our summaries tonight, and to our big story tonight, government is requesting 10 billion cedis from the central bank to tackle COVID-19 related challenges to the economy with a fiscal gap of 21.42 million cedis. Government has so far borrowed from the IMF and from the World Bank and now the central bank, which is the Bank of Ghana. Even with this borrowing, we still have a shortfall of 7.9 billion Ghana cedis. So where else can we turn to get the extra funding for our activities? I believe we'll be speaking to an economist on this development, but I want to take you through where we have been to so far as our borrowing is concerned. And if you can see on the screens now, fiscal gap is 21.42 billion Ghana cedis, consisting of 15.85 million cedis revenue shortfall and 5.57 billion cedis from the COVID-19 expenditure. And when you go down, you see that government has so far borrowed 1 billion from the IMF and then $350 million from the World Bank, and then also we are going to the central bank to borrow some 10 billion Ghana cedis. With that, we still have a shortfall of 7.9 billion Ghana cedis. And then our total debt stock as of the end of 2019 is 218 billion Ghana cedis. So that's how we are faring so far as and that was presented by the finance minister to Parliament. So I've been joined by economist Courage Boti for a lot more discussion on this development, especially with the country's debt stock rising. Courage, thanks so much for your time this evening. First of all, in the Bank of Ghana laws, 5% of the previous year's revenue is the limit that BOG can finance government. So with this request coming from government, will you say it's in line with the laws of the central bank?
Good evening, Sandra, and good evening to your listeners. I'm not sure that is quite the case. If you listen to the Bank of Ghana's presentation at the MPC the other time, I think the suggestion is that they are relying on Section 30 of the Bank of Ghana Act, I think Clause 6 specifically, which speaks to emergency funding for government in times like this. So I think if I remember my reading right, they were supposed to determine the amount in conjunction with the Controller and Accountant General. So if you realize the 10 billion package that they have actually made available, even let's focus on just the 5.5 billion that has been issued already, That's about more than the 5% of last year's revenue. If you look at the revenue of about 53 billion, that's more than the 5%, really. So they couldn't be compliant with that law. And I think they are falling on that provision that says that the government can actually fall back to the central bank in times of emergency like this. And let's understand the reasoning behind it. At this time, of course, beginning of year, the government projected that the fiscal deficit will be around 18.9 billion. What it means is the difference between expenditure and revenue for the year 2020 that we need to borrow. That is in place. Now, COVID, and that has imposed additional costs. In fact, the preliminary assessment said that they would need to borrow some 6.6 billion more. But after, I believe, the cabinet retreat a few weeks ago, they realized that they might need an extra 10 billion forward to reboot or to restart or jumpstart the economy, because the damages could be quite severe. And so you already have a 17 and 18.9 billion to finance from the capital market. The local market would not have that resource pool, and then the foreign market is turbulent, not favorable. Now you need additional expenditure or an additional revenue or money injected to jumpstart the economy. Will you want to depend on the local market that cannot supply? Will you want to go to the local market that will give you a punitive rate? I think the best compromise for all of us here is to resort to the central bank. And I believe the first component of this has been the Rwandan president who made a call like this. I support it in that that is a cheaper source of fund, one. And then which other better place to go than your central bank in time where you are squeezed and you can't go to the market? Mind you, if we do not do the needed investment now, the ravages of COVID-19 could actually prolong beyond the 3 years that we are talking about. And so we need to find the resources. Where do we find it? From central bank. Now, it borders on questions relating to inflation and all of that.
We will definitely come to that. Hold it, Courage. We'll come to that. I'm glad you mentioned running to the central bank. We'll come back to the law as to the 5% or whether we should go to 10% as being suggested. But first of all, I want to find out this request by the finance minister. Does it mean that we are going to basically print money and then the question of inflation comes in?
Oh, yeah, the central bank needs to find money to finance the government. What would that mean? In fact, central bank financing loosely is what we refer to as printing money. So central bank will have to find money from its reserves. I mean, whether that means going to the printing press now or bringing money from the stock of money supply available, I mean, or wherever they're going to find it from, that one is but practically or technically, or let's say loosely speaking, it means printing more money.
I see. Back to the law, 5% I said earlier is what the law says, but of course we are not in normal times, and so some emergency measures have been put in place. But during the IMF time it was 0%, but our law says 5%, and then there were reports that we wanted to change from the 5% to 10% before the IMF. So should we stick to the 5% by law as mandated currently, or there's a need to move to 10%?
Unfortunately, the 5.5 under the 10 billion program actually exceeds the 5%. And that tells you that we actually suspended that agreement. I know under the IMF, even though the law was revised to 5%, the Bank of Ghana and the Ministry of Finance had a memorandum of understanding that, I mean, kept it at 0%. So from the period of the IMF program all through to the end, and then that agreement was supposed to run through to 2020. We were supposed not to have borrowed from the central bank. But under the circumstances, they are doing a 10 billion program. The central bank is standing ready to make available 10 billion on need basis, starting with the 5.5 billion. It already means that we've exceeded the 5% limit. And then we are saying that these are exceptional circumstances, which I believe the Bank of Ghana Act provided for in that section 30. I think clause 6, if I remember right, which made that provision for them to resort to the central bank if need be in times like this.
All right, so definitely we need money, situation at hand. Our debt stock is also going up and is currently at 218 billion cedis. Should we still be borrowing? Mind you, we have an outstanding amount of 7.9 billion to raise. And where are we going to get this money from?
Government has always borrowed and they will continue to borrow, so long as revenues are falling short. And looking at the circumstance now, let's understand that how much revenue government can make in any given year is a function of the level of economic activity.
All right.
COVID making a lot of people stay home. If productivity is supposed to, or GDP growth is supposed to slam all the way to 1.5% from the 6.8 projected earlier, it only means that the amount of tax revenues you can generate from normal economic activity will also shrink by so much. Now, the question is, okay, year of roads. People have bad roads. People do not have rooms to sleep in. Water problems, electricity problems. Do we let the people continue with those problems, or we look for resources to meet those needs? Those are decisions government has to make. But if they decide to go ahead and implement the programs they have for the year, it only means they would have to borrow. Now, borrowing in itself, like we have always said, should not really be a bad thing unless we have made politics with it. The question really, and that is what I am looking at now, is that what are we spending these monies we are getting from?
Exactly.
I mean, if you look at the 1 billion meant for the SME, the small, micro, and medium scale enterprises, I understand that really it's not free money. They are looking at what you are producing, whether it's related to health or, I mean, the emergent needs now, and then whether you really have need to expand your business now to meet those trends. If you could convince the board that you are capable and then you have such needs, they give it to you. So if we continue in the line, then it tells you that the monies are being deployed in areas that can generate productivity for us to compensate or to pay back for those things. But then if we're going to use the monies, then of course you have to pay salaries, you have to do all of those things. And if the government is not raking enough money, the temptation is that we may be spending the money to pay the teachers that are sitting home, to pay all the other public servants that are not doing anything and are sitting home. Do you want to not pay them? That is also another difficulty you don't want to address. So it's a dicey. And then that is where the inflationary consequence of such financing could come to bear.
Right.
If we do not channel resources into productivity, which would actually compensate for the amount of money we injecting into the system, we may have inflation on our hands.
Right, well said. Quickly before you go, 30 seconds. We are borrowing, of course. How do we pay this monies back?
Of course, I mean, if the monies are invested wisely in productive sectors that can generate returns, and of course, the small-scale industry, they are supposed to pay back these loans anyway. And of course, all the other people, and I heard from your headline, and of course, it's in all over the place, that the government is putting together a more comprehensive COVID alleviation program that will kind of resuscitate the economy. Which only means that beyond the SMEs, they will be targeting a lot more companies and a lot more key sectors of the economy. I mean, if the targeting is not done right and the monies are not channeled to places they can produce and then pay for themselves, then we have problem at hand. Then the debt service becomes an issue for money to be paid through taxes, which may mean that over time, tax rates would actually be increased to make up for those things. So the usage of the revenues or the loans we are taking now is very key, and that is what we must all keep our eyes on. All
right, grateful for your time. Unfortunately, we have to leave it here. Courage Boti is an economist with Data Bank. Let's do other stories now. And Toyota says it has postponed assembling of its cars in Ghana until the COVID-19 pandemic is normalized. The Japanese automaker was supposed to commence assembling some of its cars locally as part of a broader company strategy, but head of sales operations of Toyota Ghana, Andrew Lamte, says its plan is on hold. More from the launch of the Toyota's latest salon car in this report.
Toyota Ghana, one of the automobile industry giants, has yet again outdoored two new cars for car lovers. The new 2020 edition of Toyota Corolla and the latest edition with a local name dubbed Toyota Eja are now available for purchase. According to the head of sales operations of Toyota Ghana, Andrew Lamte, they currently hold over 30% of shares in the automobile space in the country, and this is visible on the road when out of every 10 cars, Toyota brand dominates.
We are here today to introduce, first of all, a new version of the most famous saloon car called the Toyota Corolla. We have introduced the 2020 version of the Corolla with a lot of style and at a very competitive price. Now, the main reason why we gathered here today was to introduce to you our newest version of saloon cars, which is the Toyota Agya, popularly known as the Toyota Eja. It is the father of all the A-segment vehicles, and Toyota Ghana is announcing the arrival of the Toyota Eja. So the Toyota Eja is going for between 80 to 90,000. Now, what we say here is that we have some financial package for anybody who wants to pick one of these vehicles for whatever reason. And therefore, we want you to come to our showroom for us to have some discussions, and we can help you to pick one of these vehicles.
Speaking to Joy Business, he indicated that the COVID-19 pandemic has altered their plan to launch the assembly plant in a...
So the manufacturers would issue a statement very soon. Unfortunately, due to this COVID-19, there have been some delays because of the closure of our borders. So definitely we couldn't get all the support from the manufacturers. But the manufacturers would issue a statement once the borders are opening and the clear modalities and the progress will be made available to all of us.
Is government offering any assistance in that regard?
Yes, government is offering very perfect assistance to ensure that everything is put in place, to ensure that the assembly plant is put in place for the manufacturing or assembly of vehicles to happen live in Ghana. If you remember, at a TICAD conference in Japan, Toyota announced that they were supposed to have launched their first vehicle in August 2020. But for now, it's up in the air and we don't know how it's going to go. But for sure, like I said, once the lockdown conditions are eased, the manufacturers will come out with a statement.
August. The managing director indicated in his speech that the new cars were carefully made after thorough research and public survey. Fred Duho reporting for Joy Business.
In other news tonight, scientists have discovered high concentration of mercury in soil and water in mining communities as illegal operations continue to ravage the environment. An analysis on soil in the Pratt River Basin has discovered deteriorating quantity despite government restrictions on galamsey. Nanaya Ojima has been engaging researcher at Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology, Eugene Ansah, in the following report.
And as it stands now, we cannot actually promise a speed or a fast recovery with regards to our economy. But as we keep lifting the bands, the recovery is going to be slow. But for a start, it's going to receive a temporal boom.
The uncertainty that will still prevail among businesses. Why would that be so? I thought businesses will begin to go all out after things get back to normal.
Businesses are still going to space out workers. Unemployment is still going to be effective. People are still.
This is a Lumex mercury analyzer, and this is its pyro attachment. The pyro attachment is meant to paralyze the soil sample for the mercury to be transformed into the vapor form, and then it is then detected by the instrument.
Soil samples from illegal mining sites at Dunkwao on Ofin, a year after easing the ban on illegal mining, have undergone drying, ready for testing. The examination will determine the concentration of mercury in the soil. Mercury is widely used and poorly managed by these miners. From the monitors, as a layman, I see readings peaking quickly. This is how Mr. Ansah interprets the readings.
So the reading we are getting for the soil sample that we've run are high readings of a maximum of 3.50 milligram per kilogram in that soil sample we have analyzed. This tells us that there's a high content of mercury in there. Now, this high content of mercury, somebody will say that if it's high, what makes it high? What makes it high is that we have standards that we compare it to. So the standard that we are comparing it to is 0.3 milligram per kilogram. And this is from the USCP.
Even though these readings are taken from the soil, they have long-standing effect on the river Ofen. Mr. Ansan explains use of mercury by alluvial and illegal miners combine to contaminate the water.
Now, if you are mining within the water body, it means that you are disturbing the ecosystem within the immediate ecosystem or the immediate environment. Once you disturb it, it will bring up a lot of these sand particles into the water, and it will make it unclear in the first place.
Research classifies mercury as a highly toxic element, either introduced into the environment or occurring naturally. When ingested into the human body through feeding, it damages the central nervous system, exposing the human body to many diseases. To mitigate the impact of mining on the river bodies, the interministerial.
And that was a report put together by Prince Apia. And in other news tonight, savings and loans companies have hinted of some decline in the extension of loans to businesses because of COVID-19 pandemic. It follows similar warnings by some commercial banks because of challenges with loan repayment, which are impacting negatively on new credit. Aboagye-Wiafe is the executive secretary of the Associations of Savings and Loans Companies.
Now people need their monies, their deposits. So the prudent decision is not to give it out as loan, but rather make it available to the customer who needs his money. Those who have also taken the loans, you want to make sure that they pay so that you can get the money to give to the depositor. If you look at the liquidity support, some of them are requesting from the central bank. Some of them need it, so they will continue to grant the loan at the pace of which they were moving to support the critical sectors. But for some of them, it will not be prudent to continue to grant loans because if the people that you grant loans to, if your clientele is to people who import, now they cannot import, so you can't continue to grant loans. And so, case by case basis, you realize that at the global level, credit delivery will be impacted. And that is the reason why, if you heard the central bank saying that the commercial banks, some of them have put a package together for a specific industry, like the manufacturing, the pharmaceutical areas. And these manufacturing and pharmaceutical areas are not areas we serve because we serve the lower tier. And so some of our members are continuously granting loans to those lower tiers. But for some, they will have to take a halt.
And that's all for the program tonight. My name is Sandra Estin. I'm happy to do enjoy your weekend by coming your way at 7 p.m. on the Joy News Prime with more business news updates. But in the meantime, you can log on to our website, myjoyonline.com/business. And there you go. Those are the headlines on our page now. Thanks so much for watching.